You ever notice how some people they just seem to get money? Like it's not always the ones working the hardest, but they just wealth finds them somehow. It's like they have some secret playbook they're working from, right? Well, today we're diving deep into a book that kind of claims to reveal those secrets, you know. It's Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Now, this book has been a bestseller forever, and it's all about these financial lessons that Kiyosaki learned not from school, not from some fancy course. He actually learned them from two dads in his life. So, first, you have his own father, who he calls Poor Dad, who was a highly educated teacher, but he struggled financially. And then you have his best friend's dad, who he calls Rich Dad. And Rich Dad was a self made entrepreneur with a totally different way of thinking about money. And you know, one of the biggest aha moments, I don't know about you, but for me, it was this quote from Rich Dad. He said, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." And it's kind of like flips the script on that old saying, right? The love of money is the root of all evil. It made me realize how much we're taught to be afraid of money, to see it as something dangerous or even corrupting.
Mm.
But what if it's actually the lack of money that causes more problems? I mean, think about it, the stress, the anxiety, all those missed opportunities that come from not having enough. And this kind of ties into another big takeaway from the book, and that's what Kiyosaki calls the financial literacy gap. I mean, schools do a great job of, filling our heads with knowledge about history, science, literature. But how many of us graduated knowing how to actually manage our money, invest wisely, or build wealth? I know I didn't. I remember when I first graduated from college, I landed this pretty decent job. I was so proud of myself. I thought, okay, I've made it, I'm on my way.
Yeah.
But then I started getting these insane credit card bills. And it turned out I had no clue about budgeting, interest rates. Forget about it. It was a harsh wake-up call, let me tell you. And that's really what Rich Dad Poor Dad is all about. It's about teaching us those financial skills that a lot of us just didn't learn in school. Like understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Now, Kiyosaki, he breaks this down very simply. He says, an asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. It's all about that cash flow. So that fancy new car that you've been, kind of eyeing, yeah, it's a lot of fun to drive, but all those loan payments, the insurance, the repairs, pure liabilities. Now, on the other hand, imagine you buy a small rental property, right? Sure, there are going to be expenses. But if the rent that you're collecting covers all those costs and it puts extra cash in your pocket every month, well, you've got yourself an asset. And this is how the rich, they think differently, right? They focus on building up their asset column. They're creating systems that generate what's called passive income, money that flows in, even when they're not actively working. Kiyosaki, he illustrates this with these diagrams in the book, showing the cash flow patterns of the rich, the poor, and the middle class. And it's kind of mind-blowing, when you see it laid out like that. The rich, they're directing their money towards investments, towards assets that multiply their wealth, while so many of the rest of us, we're kind of stuck in this hamster wheel, just earning, spending, never getting ahead. Another powerful concept from the book is what Kiyosaki calls minding your own business. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to start a company, although, it's definitely an option. What he's talking about here is building that asset column, right? You're creating that financial foundation that's going to give you freedom and security. And he uses Ray Kroc as an example, the guy behind McDonald's. We all think of McDonald's as this, burger joint. But Kroc's real genius was in recognizing the value of the real estate. He was building an empire of assets. He wasn't just selling burgers. And made me realize how often we get caught up in the wrong things. We're focused on the day-to-day grind, the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And we kind of forget to step back and think about the bigger picture, building something that works for us, not just trading our time for money. And this leads to another topic that can be a little bit controversial, and that's the power of corporations. Kiyosaki, he really dives deep into how the wealthy, they use corporations to legally minimize their taxes and protect their assets. Now, this can be a touchy subject, I know, But I think it's crucial that we understand how the game is played, even if it makes us a little bit uncomfortable, right? Like, for example, corporations can write off business expenses before they pay taxes. So let's say you're a freelancer, you're working from home, you can potentially deduct a portion of your rent, your utilities, your internet as business expenses. Suddenly, that home office is not just a place to work, it's part of your wealth building strategy. It's like Kiyosaki saying, hey, the rules are there, why not use them to your advantage? It's not about cheating the system. It's about understanding the system and playing it strategically. But building wealth, it's not just about these, financial tactics, right? It's also about overcoming those inner obstacles, the things that hold us back. Kiyosaki talks a lot about conquering fear. And I think that's something that resonates with everyone, right? We're all afraid of something, whether it's investing in the stock market, starting a business, or even just asking for a raise. I remember this one time I had this amazing idea for a side hustle. I spent weeks, doing all this research, making plans. I even designed a logo. I was so excited. And then I just totally chickened out. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment. What if people thought I was stupid? It paralyzed me. And looking back, I realized that fear cost me a valuable opportunity. It's like Kiyosaki says, the only way to overcome fear is to face it head on. He even uses the story of the Alamo as an example, which I thought was really interesting. Now, yeah, it was a brutal defeat for the Texans, right? But instead of letting that loss crush them, they turned it into fuel. It became this rallying cry for their independence. And it's such a powerful metaphor. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about learning from our mistakes, getting back up, trying again, and coming back stronger. That's the kind of resilience that we need to build our own financial empires. And speaking of building, Kiyosaki also talks about another obstacle, laziness. But he's not talking about being a couch potato here. He's talking about being busy with the wrong things, putting all of our energy into activities that don't actually move us closer to our financial goals. Like, I remember this one time I spent hours, literal hours, researching the perfect coffee maker, obsessing over the features, reading all the reviews. It was such a time suck, and it didn't generate a single dollar for me, not one. So what's Kiyosaki's solution to this financial laziness? It's a simple one, but it's powerful. He says, pay yourself first. Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive, especially when you have bills piling up, right? But his point is, if we always prioritize expenses over our financial future, we'll never break free from that cycle. It's about treating your financial well-being like it's the most important bill that you have to pay. Now, I know all of this. This might be sounding a little bit overwhelming, like, where do I even begin? Don't worry, we're going to break it all down in this episode. We're going to talk about actionable steps that you can actually use. And trust me, once you start applying these principles, you're going to start seeing money in a whole new light. So stay tuned. We're just getting started. So we talked about fear, right? And we talked about laziness. But there's this other sneaky obstacle that can really mess with our financial success. It's arrogance. You might be thinking, arrogance, what does that have to do with money? But Kiyosaki, he makes this really interesting point. He says that arrogance, a lot of times, it masks ignorance. When we think we know it all, we stop learning. We stop asking questions. And we end up missing out on opportunities to grow. And the world of finance, which is constantly changing, that can be a recipe for disaster. It reminds me of this time I totally bombed a job interview. And I was so sure, so sure, that I had it in the bag. I had researched the company, I'd practiced all my answers. I even picked out like the perfect outfit. But then when I got into the interview, I was barely even listening to the questions. I was just like in my head, patting myself on the back for how well I thought I was doing. Needless to say, I did not get the job. And looking back, it was totally my arrogance that tripped me up. I had let my ego totally inflate my sense of competence. And it cost me. Kiyosaki, he really stresses how important it is to be a lifelong learner, to stay humble, be open to new ideas. He's always talking about finding mentors, reading books, attending seminars. It's all about recognizing that we never really arrive.
Mm.
Like, okay, I'm done learning. There's always more to learn, always something new to discover. And speaking of discovering, Kiyosaki is like, he's a master at spotting opportunities where other people just see obstacles. And he shares this story in the book about how he bought this rundown old house that like everybody else was ignoring. It was not pretty, it needed tons of work, but he saw something that other people missed. He saw that the property came with these extra lots, and he tore down the house, sold the lots to a developer, and made a killing. It was like he had this, like, financial x-ray vision or
Yeah.
something. He could see the potential value hidden beneath the surface. And he wants us to develop that same kind of vision, to train ourselves to look beyond the obvious, to find those hidden gems that other people might just dismiss. He also really emphasizes the importance of taking action, like not letting fear or procrastination hold us back. He has this thing, he says, make lots of offers. So whether it's real estate, a business deal, you're negotiating your salary, whatever it is, the key is to just put yourself out there, even if you think you might get rejected. It's like this one time I was terrified to ask for a raise. I had been like putting it off for months. I kept rehearsing the conversation in my head, worrying about what my boss would say. But finally, I went for it. And guess what? I got the raise. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, of course. But like Kiyosaki says, you never know what might happen until you try. Now, this might surprise you, but Kiyosaki, this guy who's all about building wealth, he's also a big believer in the power of giving. He talks about how the truly wealthy, they're often the most generous people, and he believes that the act of giving can actually attract abundance into our lives. He even talks about tithing, which might seem kind of counterintuitive when you're focused on, accumulating wealth. But his point is, when we give freely, when we operate from this mindset of abundance, it comes back to us. Now, I'm not saying you have to start tithing or donating all of your money or anything like that, but the principle here is about shifting our perspective from, scarcity to abundance. When we focus on what we have rather than what we lack, it creates this really powerful energy that can attract more wealth, more opportunities into our lives. So we've covered a lot of ground, right? We talked about assets and liabilities, overcoming fear, laziness, arrogance, embracing the power of giving. But how do we actually put all this wisdom into practice? Well, Kiyosaki, he gives us a bunch of actionable steps, things that we can start doing right now to build our own paths to financial freedom. So first things first, find yourself a mentor. Find someone who's already achieved the success that you desire. Someone who can offer you guidance and support along the way. It could be someone you know personally, or it could be someone you admire from afar. The key is to just tap into their experience. Learn from their successes and their failures. Next up, invest in your financial education. Read books, attend seminars, take online courses, whatever works for you. There are so many resources out there, and it doesn't have to be expensive. You can find amazing information for free at libraries, online communities, and even, podcasts like this one. The point is to become a lifelong learner, constantly expanding your knowledge, refining your skills. And remember Kiyosaki's advice to make lots of offers. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, to negotiate, to take risks. I mean, the worst that can happen is they say no, right? But you never know what amazing opportunities might be waiting on the other side of that no. And when it comes to investing, Kiyosaki says it's important to think big. Don't limit yourself to conventional wisdom. Look for those hidden gems, those undervalued assets that other people might be overlooking. He also reminds us to be patient. Building wealth, it takes time. It takes consistent effort. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about creating a solid foundation for long-term financial security and freedom. And perhaps most importantly, Kiyosaki, he stresses the importance of developing a strong financial mindset. It's about believing in your ability to create wealth, to overcome challenges, and to achieve your financial goals. It's about shifting your perspective from scarcity to abundance, from fear to confidence, from procrastination to action. And that, my friends, is the true essence of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's not just a book about money. It's a book about personal transformation. It's about challenging our limiting beliefs, embracing new possibilities, and creating a life of abundance and purpose. So, as we kind of wrap up this section, I want to leave you with this question. What one small step can you take today to start building your own path to financial freedom?
Maybe it's picking up a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad and, really diving deeper into these concepts. Maybe it's reaching out to a potential mentor or signing up for a financial literacy course, or maybe it's just making that decision to start paying yourself first. Whatever that step is, I encourage you to take it, because financial freedom, it's not some distant dream. It's a journey that we can all embark on one step at a time. All right, so we covered so much from Rich Dad Poor Dad: assets, liabilities, corporations, like everything, right? But you know what really stuck with me? It's not just about like the tactics, it's about the mindset. Kiyosaki talks about building this wealthy mindset. And honestly, that's where the real magic happens, right? He shares this story that's so relatable. He talks about how he used to be, get this, terrified of public speaking. Like terrified. Can you imagine? This is a guy who's written all these best-selling books, and he speaks to these huge crowds all the time. But he used to like freeze up just thinking about it. But he knew that if he wanted to, share his message, build his business, he had to face that fear.
And he realized, the more he did it, the easier it got. And that fear, it transformed into confidence. And eventually it became this driving force behind his success. It made me think, what's my Alamo? What's that thing that I'm avoiding? Because it just like scares me. Maybe it's launching that online course I've been thinking about forever. Or finally, taking the plunge and investing in real estate. Fear can be so paralyzing. But Kiyosaki's story, it's this powerful reminder that on the other side of fear, there's this incredible opportunity waiting for us. And he uses the Alamo, like that iconic battle, as a metaphor. I mean, the Texans, they lost. It was brutal. But they used that defeat. They turned it into like fuel. It became this rallying cry for independence. It's
Right.
not about avoiding failure, right? It's about using those setbacks as stepping stones. Learn from your mistakes, get back up, come back stronger. That's the kind of resilience that we need if we want to build our own financial empires, right? And speaking of building, Kiyosaki drops these gems about specialized skills. You might think, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm a specialty. But he argues that everyone, no matter what you do, you need skills like sales and marketing. Think about it. Being able to communicate effectively, persuade, build relationships. These are valuable skills in any profession, right? Even in your personal life. Reminds me of this time I was trying to sell my old car online. And I took these like really bad photos, wrote this like boring description. And you know what? I got 0 responses. Then a friend of mine who's like a marketing whiz gave you some tips. Said, take better pictures, highlight the key features, tell a story about the car, and boom, I sold it within a week. It's crazy how those like kind of subtle skills can make such a huge difference. And finally, one of the most surprising and honestly inspiring takeaways from Rich Dad Poor Dad is how much Kiyosaki emphasizes giving. You're probably thinking, wait, isn't this book about getting rich? But he really believes that the truly wealthy people, they're often the most generous people.
He even talks about tithing, which again, might seem a little counterintuitive, but his point is when you give freely, when you operate from a place of abundance, it comes back to you tenfold. Now, look, I'm not saying you have to go donate all your money or anything, but it's about shifting your mindset, from scarcity to abundance. When you focus on what you have, what you're grateful for, rather than what you lack, it creates this positive energy that can bring more wealth and more opportunities into your life. So we've explored a lot of really powerful concepts from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, challenging conventional wisdom, building that wealth mindset, taking action even when you're scared. It's been a wild ride, right? But here's the thing. You don't have to like blindly follow Kiyosaki's advice. The key is to take these principles, these insights, and figure out what works for you, what resonates with you. What action can you take today to start building your own path to financial freedom? Maybe it's finally picking up a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad and diving deeper in these ideas. Or maybe it's finding a mentor in your field, someone who can guide you,
Or taking that first step towards investing. Whatever it is, I hope this deep dive has, sparked some ideas, challenged your thinking, and inspired you to take control of your financial future. Because at the end of the day, financial freedom, it's not just about money. It's about having the knowledge, the skills, and the mindset to create the life you truly want. So go out there, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.